Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thanks for joining me this evening for Dharma Sunday, where we take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them with everyday life. The title of today's talk will be Kyle Rittenhouse and Buddhist Prayer, Stopping Our Addiction to Violence. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So the big topic in the news this week is Kyle Rittenhouse being acquitted of all charges in regards to the shooting that happened in Kenosha. And before we go too far into this, I want to say that I won't be offering my opinion on the acquittal or the case as a whole for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't feel it would be appropriate for me to do that. Also, there are a lot of other people offering their opinions, so I feel like that piece of it is more than covered. I think there's a larger picture we need to be looking at, and I really want to focus in on that. That said, I do have an article here that will catch people up if they're not aware of what's happened with the trial and whatnot, so I'll read a little bit from that, and then we can talk more. So let's get into it. This article comes from NBCChicago.com. The title is Jury Finds Kyle Rittenhouse Not Guilty on All Counts in Kenosha Shooting. I don't see a byline here, but again, it's at NBCChicago.com. And it says, a jury on Friday found Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on all counts in his murder trial connected to the shootings of 3 people during unrest in Kenosha during the summer of 2020. The decision comes on the 4th day of deliberations as jurors weighed charges against Rittenhouse, aiming to determine whether he was the instigator of a night of bloodshed in Kenosha or a concerned citizen who came under attack while trying to protect property. The jury of 12 had deliberated for 3 full days without reaching a decision. As Rittenhouse was acquitted on all accounts, he at first stood still and silent. By the end of the reading of the 3rd count, Rittenhouse began to shake, and then once the 5th not guilty verdict was read, he appeared to sob and then fall down into the table. To say that we are relieved would be a gross misunderstanding, defense attorney Mark Richards said while speaking to media outside his Racine office following the verdict. Kyle is not here. He's on his way home. He wants to get on with his life. He has a huge sense of relief for what the jury did to him today. Prosecutor Thomas Binger said that while the state is disappointed with the verdict, it must be respected. We are grateful to the members of the jury for their diligent and thoughtful deliberations, Binger said in a statement. The Kenosha community has endured much over the past 15 months, and yet we remain resilient and strong. We ask that members of our community continue to express their opinions and feelings about this verdict in a civil and peaceful manner. Rittenhouse, 18, was on trial for killing 2 men and wounding a 3rd with a rifle during a turbulent night of protests that erupted in Kenosha in the summer of 2020 after a black man, Jacob Blake, was shot by a white police officer. Rittenhouse said he acted in self-defense, while the prosecution argued he instigated the bloodshed. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop there for the sake of time, but again, if you'd like to read the entire article yourself, the title is Jury Finds Kyle Rittenhouse Not Guilty on All Counts in Kenosha Shootings, and it can be found at NBCChicago.com. So, what does this have to do with Buddhism? You're probably wondering. And to me, what stands out about this case is that it points to a rather troubling trend in our society and in the media in terms of how we deal with deaths and how we deal with the killings of human beings, and how one question that I've been asked over and over and over again whenever this topic, the Rittenhouse trial, has come up is, did you see the video? Meaning, did you see the video that was taken on people's cell phone of Kyle shooting and killing 2 individuals and wounding another? And the reason that's a problem to me, the reason it's scary, is it points to a trend where we no longer see the deaths of human beings as tragic, and instead we've started to see them as entertainment. It's something we watch in the same way that we would watch a football game, in the same way that we would watch a cartoon. It's just a thing we do on Saturday night, and then we talk about it with our friends at the office. I saw this in other cases, the cases of Fernando Castillo, the case of George Floyd, and I know these names elicit strong emotions, but I'd encourage us all to take a deep breath and really dig into what's really happening here, the big picture, which is that people dying has become, like I said, a form of entertainment, a form of fun almost. I've talked a lot on my Twitter about outrage media and outrage marketing, and how in order to get engagement, we use the vilest, darkest, scariest parts of human nature to get people riled up, to get them angry, to get them emotional. And this is what's happening here. This is what happened with this trial with Kyle Rittenhouse. One of the reasons I'm not giving my own opinion on the trial is I don't want to add to that fury, to that fire. What we're witnessing is the cheapening and the degradation of human life. We're witnessing an event where we've gone from all beings are Buddha, which is what we're taught in the Nirvana Sutra, to all beings are a cheap and easy way to get ratings. Violence is the new currency, the new way to get clout in our world, and not just on social media, but also on mainstream media. Oftentimes it's said that if it bleeds, it leads. So we don't show stories that are warm and uplifting. We show stories of people being shot, of people being injured. And if you have video of that, even better. I personally, in my own life, have made the decision that I'm not watching any more videos of people getting killed. I'm just not going to do it. I don't want to see people being killed. I don't want to see them being seriously injured. And look, I served 8 years in the U.S. Marines, so I don't have what you would call a queasy stomach. But due to my training in Buddhism, I understand that these things have real effects on our brains, and they do things to us as people. And I brought this up previously to a friend of mine, and it was funny because he said, well, don't you watch movies where people get killed? And that's where we are as a society, where we don't differentiate between Thanos, an imaginary character in the Marvel universe, being played by actors who are pretending to be other people. We don't differentiate between that anymore and real life human beings. It's all one thing. Again, it's all entertainment. It's all stories we tell ourselves. And to understand why this is a problem, we can look at the teachings of Buddhism, primarily the teachings of Vasubandhu and Asanga, and I feel like I talk about them every week, so I'm not going to go too deep into their teachings, but long story short, our reality is made up of nothing but constructs of consciousness. It's made up of stories. And then we take those streams of consciousness, we attach an image to them, we add an insight to it, and that's how we understand our reality. So maybe it's a visual stream of consciousness. I see something in front of me. My brain attaches an image to it. Table. Now there's an insight, there's a story. It's a good table, it's a bad table, it's a wobbly table, and I'm mad at the guy who sold it to me. If I ever see him, ooh. And this may seem like not a big deal, but in Buddhism we understand that if our entire reality is made up of stories, then we have to be very careful about the stories we tell ourselves. Because if every time I use that wobbly table, I tell myself, if I ever see the guy who sold this to me, then what do you think is going to happen when I actually see him? after I've told myself that story over and over and over and over again. So what's the story that's being told to us if we're told that human beings have been shot, human beings have been killed? Go watch the tape. In the same way that we'd watch a basketball tape or a football game or anything of that nature. We have to be very careful about the stories we tell ourselves and that we allow to be told to us, because they have real world consequences. Now, there are two ways to deal with these stories. One is to try and eliminate them completely. This is something that's done in Zen practice through the practice of silent illumination. So we sit on the cushion, hands in the concentration mudra, back straight. And as Dogen instructed us, we think not thinking. So this is different than the guided meditations we do on Wednesdays, in that we just let our thoughts come. And we see them come, we see these stories arise, and then we see them float away. And slowly but surely over time, we realize these stories have no inherent self. They're not permanent, they're not abiding, they're not separate. So we slowly learn not to take them so seriously. This is a difficult practice, but it's a very powerful one. The other way to deal with these stories is to create new and better ones. So we have all these negative stories that are coming from the world, and we counteract those stories by creating new ones of our own. Sometimes I talk about a practice in Buddhism called opposing forces. So if I'm feeling greedy, I counteract that through the practice of charity. Maybe I make a donation to a charity, or I do something nice for a neighbor, make a meal for a loved one. If I'm feeling angry towards someone, I oppose that angry story by giving them a compliment. And by doing that, I rob that energy from the story. I replace it with something better. Buddhism is nothing but stories. Buddha Dharma, like all dharmas, is empty. It has no permanent, separately abiding self. But it's a story that is useful and nourishing to our lives. All beings are Buddha is a story. So how do we deal with that story? Well, we take a page out of the book of pragmatist philosophers like John Dewey, and we ask ourselves, is this story useful? Is it helpful to me? And for me, that story, all beings are Buddha, was life-changing. Because now, if all beings are Buddha, then all beings are sacred. All beings, including myself, deserve to be honored and respected and cared for. So I'm kind to myself and I'm kind to all people, because all beings are Buddha. 2 + 2 = 4 is a story. Math has no permanently separately abiding self, but it's a very good and useful story. Mathematics as a whole have allowed us to build the world as it exists now, with homes and electricity and bridges. So we hold to that story. So when we talk about Buddhist prayer, what we are talking about is the latter. We're not trying to eliminate stories, rather we're trying to replace them with new ones, with better ones that are healthy, that are life-affirming, that help us see the sacred nature of all life. Now, it's important, this word prayer carries a lot of different meanings, and there are many different types of prayer that we learn about in theology. Most people are most familiar with prayer of supplication, meaning we're asking for something. I'm over here, there's someone else over there, and we are praying, please give me a new car. Please help me pass this test. And we don't do supplicatory prayer in Buddhism. We have gods, we have devils, we have ghosts and angels, etc. Buddhist cosmology is a whole thing when it comes to the supernatural. But we see these beings as being not that different from us, human beings, that we're all trapped in the cycle of transmigration. So, as opposed to other religions where they pray to gods and celestial beings for help, if you read the Buddhist scripture, you actually find where the Buddha is going to these various realms and teaching the Dharma to gods, to devils, to angels, etc. So we don't pray out of supplication in Buddhism. Rather, we use prayers of gratitude, prayers of lament, prayers of intercession. And the way we utilize prayer is as a method of spiritual formation, a way to change the stories in our mind and counteract the negative stories that are coming in from the world around us. And in doing so, these prayers allow us to plant seeds of compassion and seeds of wisdom, not only in our minds, but also in the storehouse consciousness. Remember, we're constantly planting seeds, karmic seeds, in the storehouse consciousness. These seeds can be positive, these seeds can be negative, but these seeds always ripen once the time is right. So we have to decide if we are going to plant seeds in our mind, or are we going to allow the world to plant seeds for us. Buddhist prayer is a way for us to take control of the narrative. The way for us to plant seeds in our own minds that we want to grow. Seeds that we know will help us end suffering, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings. And in cases like this, where we have very strong emotions, like in the Rittenhouse trial, like in the case of George Floyd, like in the case of Fernando Castillo, prayer becomes more and more important. I find in my own life that sometimes it's difficult to sit on the cushion and do nothing. Again, silent illumination is a very powerful practice. I do it every day, but it's hard. This is why the Buddha, in his own wisdom and compassion, gave us these other practices as well to support us in our silent illumination. He gave us sutra study, he gave us prayers, he gave us prostrations. So what kind of prayers do we have in Buddhism? Well, the two that I use the most in my own practice, one is the Nimbutsu chant, or the Nimbutsu prayer. Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. And Amida Buddha is the personification of our own enlightened nature, our Buddha nature. That part of us that is compassionate, that is wise, that is good. Now, as I said before, the story we tell ourselves in Buddhism is all beings are Buddha. This is that basic goodness you sometimes hear about. So I know that Buddha is within me, and it's also within other people as well. But there are times when it's hard to see. Times when my emotional baggage is so great that all I see is pain and suffering all around me. So this Nimbutsu prayer is powerful because what it allows us to do is to cut through all of those negative stories, eliminate them, and then replace them again with something healthy and life-affirming. Namo Amida Butsu. And in this chant of Namo Amida Butsu, we do a couple of things. One, we express faith in our belief that that goodness, even though we can't see it, is still there. That goodness still lives in us, and it still lives in other people. And we express gratitude for that goodness. Reverend Soga Ryojin, a Pure Land Buddhist minister, once said that the expression of gratitude causes us to find reasons to be grateful. So we don't wait until we have a reason to be grateful in Buddhism. We express gratitude anyway, just because. And in the expression of gratitude, we find things that we're grateful for. We're reminded of the food in our refrigerator, the gas in our car, the loved ones that check in on us, the job that allows us to pay our bills, the things that we didn't see before we started chanting Namo Amida Butsu. We see it now because in the expression of gratitude, again, we find reasons to be grateful. I've also found that the Nembutsu chant can be an excellent expression of lament. In times when we're sad, in times when we're in pain, when those stories are in our heads, I'm not good enough, I don't belong here, everyone's out to get me, my neighbor is Sometimes it's hard to put all those feelings into words, and we need to express it somehow just to get it out. But we need to express it and get it out in a healthy, life-affirming way. So the Nembutsu chant allows us to take all of our baggage and dump it on the Buddha. He, in his compassion, carries that load for us. And all we have to do is chant Namo Amida Butsu. It's like cleaning our minds in the same way that we would clean a mirror. Removing all the dust that we get from the media, all those stories that cheapen and degrade human life. So the Nembutsu chant is very powerful in that way. The other prayer, or chant if you prefer, that I like quite a bit is the metta prayer, also known as loving kindness. May all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be cared for. May all beings be loved. The other way I've heard it put sometimes is may all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be loved. Either one is fine. But the point is that, again, when we tell that story, that intercessory prayer in this case, so instead of expressing gratitude or lament, we are actively devoting ourselves to the well-being of other people, other sentient beings. We break down that illusion of a separate self between us and them. We learn to care for them in the same way that we care for ourselves. So instead of me, mine, please give me things, like we sometimes find in supplicatory prayer, through intercessory prayer, may all beings be healthy, may all beings be happy, may all beings be healthy, may all beings be safe, may all beings be loved. We are instead thinking about others. And this can be expressly powerful if we don't necessarily like those others. It's hard to wish well-being on people who have done harm to us. But I've found that this metta meditation, this loving kindness, can be very helpful in helping to break down that barrier and create space where we can find forgiveness, where we can see the goodness in the other people, even if they can't see it within themselves. So as we continue on in this world, in this cycle of transmigration, and we continue being told these stories, that human death is entertainment, that there's no difference between people dying in a movie and people dying in real life, and that we should watch the video just to see what happened, it can be useful to replace those stories with the stories of Buddha, the stories of gratitude, the stories of lament, the stories of loving kindness that we find through Buddhist prayer. And through that prayer, we engage in spiritual formation of our minds, replacing Mara with Buddha, replacing hate and degeneracy with wisdom and with compassion, so that we are better able to live in this world of suffering and still work for the benefit of all beings, both ourselves and others. Amitabha. So, that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just end with a few announcements. So this is Dharma Sunday. We do it every Sunday at 7 p.m., broadcast from this channel. I just take something that's big in the news or pop culture that week and reflect on it from a Buddhist perspective. On every Wednesday, we do meditation and sutra study, which is a bit different, a bit more involved. We do a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a Buddhist scripture, followed by a Dharma Talk. So I hope to see you there. Until next time, Amitabha.